Hello and welcome to a brand new option for 2025. So this is the GCSE in Classical Civilisations run by the exam board OCR, and I hope that loads of you will take this up. It's been a really popular ask over the last few years, so let me tell you a little bit about what this course involves. So first of all, what is classical civilisations? What do we mean by that term? And we have to go back and consider what do we mean by the classical world. Few questions to kind of prompt your thinking around this. Have you ever heard of Zeus or Hades or Hercules? Because all of those figures, despite the fact you might have seen them in film and maybe in a Disney film, doesn't take away from the fact that originally they come from the classical world. So the classical world really relates to the development and the domination of these empires, in this case Rome and Greece, in politics, religion, the military, economy and culture, and it's over a sustained period of time. And that includes the conquest of Julius Caesar, the legendary Roman army. If you've ever heard the phrase, "This is Sparta," this comes from the classical world. So if you have an interest in ancient Greece and Rome, this is probably the course for you. So then, out of all the other options that you could have, as you know, you choose your humanities option. So in the open block, Classical Civilisations is there for you, but why choose to study it? Well, ancient Greece and Rome has left a huge legacy, and studying it will develop a deeper understanding of the foundations of the modern world, particularly including democracy, which comes from ancient Greece, military tactics, and cultural cornerstones. A lot of the stories that we listen to are based on things that happened in ancient Greece and Rome. The stories are exciting as well. The stories of the gods and their relationship to people, looking at heroes such as Hercules and Heracles, the story of Romulus and Remus, the Battle of Thermopylae, which for a lot of you, if you've seen 300, is the Battle of the 300, and also the journey to the underworld, which is always really fascinating. This is also a chance to learn something new, a chance to study a period of history that's unique, it's bespoke, and it's not often covered in secondary school. So looking at the ancient world, a lot of our history kind of goes from the early modern period, so Battle of Bosworth and beginning of the Tudors onwards. You'll develop lots of really fantastic intercurricular skills, excellent essay writing skills, source analysis. You'll also develop some deep thinking skills and show that you've got an interest in people and cultures. There's also really good links to English literature and to religious studies. So think about your combinations of subjects as well. We look at the poetry of Homer, of Horace and Virgil, including the story of the Odyssey, the Aeneid, and lots of other adventure stories. So again, if that is something that interests you, then really classical civilisations might be a really exciting and interesting way to improve those skills, as well as learning about something new. As well as being an exciting subject, the qualification is a great preparation for a wide variety of A-level subjects. You could use classical civilisations to study art history or politics or law, as well as continuing on with classical civilisations, ancient history and history at A-level. If A-levels are not for you, if you want to go into vocational courses or go straight into work or an apprenticeship, then the skills that you get from this course will stand you in really good stead. So it includes showing that you can have a broad interest, you can communicate your ideas well. All of that will stand you, above everybody else if you're moving towards apprenticeships, the job market and any other vocational courses. You can see on the screen there that there's a range of future jobs that classical civilisations could be applicable to. So you've got your typical ones, your historian, your archaeologist, archivist, museum curator, professor and teacher. However, movie consultant, films like Gladiator 2, films like This Is 300, films like Troy, all had to have consultants that were experts in the ancient world, in classical civilisations. It's the same for video games as well. They'd need consultants on there to make sure it's as accurate as possible. You might use it to go into journalism or law. You might want to be a tour guide in Greece, in Athens or in Rome or any of the other amazing ancient civilization cities. You might use it to become a politician or a writer. You might go into business because it's great analytical skills that you'll be developing. And again, we've got an analyst in general of data, of sources, etc. So lots and lots of really fantastic opportunities if you take this subject. So how is the course structured? Well, we have two components that we've chosen. So component 1 is on myth and religion, and we look at both ancient Greece and Rome within that component. And it includes gods, heroes, religion and cities, festivals, myths and symbols of power, death and burial, and journeying to the underworld. It's examined at the end of year 11 with a 1 hour 30-minute exam, which is worth 50% of the final grade. Component 2 is the literature and culture component, again focusing on Greece and Rome together, and we've chosen to focus on war and warfare. And key topics would be Sparta, Athens and Rome at war. And again, it's paper 2, 1 hour and 30 minutes, and again it's worth 50%. So both the papers are split equally across the final grade. So let's then look at a little bit more detail about what these components include to make sure you can make a really good decision about what you're going to go on and study. So in the myth and religion topic, we will look at the gods of Greece and Rome, including the impact of the gods on the people and the relationship they develop with the people. You've got the idea of the universal hero. What is a hero? How do they inspire people? Looking at all those statues and those friezes. Why have they been put on the walls? What is it about them that makes them memorable? We'll look at the myth and the city. So how were these cities founded in the first place? So you've got Romulus and Remus, who are responsible supposedly for the founding of Rome. And you've got Poseidon and Athena and the founding of Athens. So, and we're going to compare those two foundation stories and see what is similar about them, but then what is unique to each one. And we will also look at festivals. So you've got the city of Dionysia and the Saturnalia, two different festivals, one in Greece and one in Rome. And again, the comparison between the two and the key features of each. There are 3 other subtopics within myths and the religion. So you've got the myths and symbols of power, again a comparison, death and burial, and journeying to the underworld, where there are 2 specific stories that we look at. So the story of Persephone and Demeter, and the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. Okay, so one's from Homer and one's from Ovid, and we compare the 2 and look at the differences in that journey to the underworld. So component 2, as I said, is the literature and culture section. So in terms of the knowledge that's going to be needed for the war and warfare, we look at Sparta at war in the 5th century. So you've got the war with Persia, how the army is trained, what are the formations, this idea of the idealization of war in Sparta. So why is war looked on as the greatest thing ever? And we will look at the Battle of Thermopylae. And then we'll look at Athens in the 5th century as well, again looking at the war with Persia, poor Persia, focusing again around the army, the navy, and we'll look at a naval battle there with the Battle of Salamis. We'll then go on to look at Rome, which you can see on the next slide. So we spend a little bit longer on Rome because we look at the Roman military in the imperial period, looking for how the army was trained, how it was paid for, how it was organised. So this is kind of like at the height of Rome, when Rome was all conquering. And we'll look specifically at the Roman fortress at Chester, how that was laid out after the Roman invasion of Britain. And we'll also look at the Romans at war themselves. So you've got the Battle of Actium, which is the one that broke out after the death of Julius Caesar, and Trajan's campaign against the Dacians. Again, looking at a bit about causation there. So why did they go to war? How did they go to war? And also the victims of warfare in that case as well. So you've got how the Roman army was put together and some of the battles that they were then involved in following that. So as I said at the beginning, part of this course is on the literature that supports it. You've got to remember, when you look at classical civilizations, it's very different from looking at even Tudor history, even medieval history, in the fact that a lot of the sources of the past are either archaeological or they come from people who have written down the stories of what happened. So some of the features we're going to look at in the literature is looking at how the writers wrote about key individuals, what type of language are they using in their poems, hence the link to your English literature or English language papers, some of the themes that come up, such as the horror and the glorification of war, but there are others, and again, it's going back to this idea of what constitutes a hero. So the 4 key texts that we look at within this part of the course is Homer's The Iliad, Tyrtaeus, The Fallen Warrior, Horace's Ode, and Virgil's Aeneid. They are the key texts, and you'll be given handouts of this, and we'll study them really carefully in order to support the knowledge that you've learnt previously about war and warfare. So how is this assessed? We've briefly covered this earlier in the presentation, but just to reiterate, there is no coursework for the Classical Civilisations GCSE. It's the OCR exam board, and all assessment is at the end of year 11, as in final assessment. So a reminder there about paper 1 and paper 2, both worth 50%, both done in an exam of an hour and a half. Now, the great thing about Classical Civilisations is there is such a range of questions. So we've got 1 mark questions, 2 mark questions, 3 mark questions. So this is not all an essay writing subject. There are some 8 mark questions, and there's 1 15 mark question on each section of the paper. But for a lot of it, it's knowledge based 1, 2 or 3 mark questions, which if you are not so great at essay writing might be something to look at, as it's not as heavy on the writing as maybe some other subjects. Now, as well as that, there'll obviously be ongoing assessment as well. We will be using progress tests similar to what we use in history. There'll be practice exam questions built in, as well as the online homework that will continue into Key Stage 4 in order to monitor the knowledge that is being gathered as we go through the course. And so that is it. And if we think Classical Civilisations, what has it ever done for us? If you now need a bit of a smile, please do look at the clip below. I couldn't resist putting in, what have the Romans ever done for us?